Hello, I'm Gemma Fontané, and this is SEO in 2024.
Gemma, what's your number one SEO tip for 2024?
My number one SEO tip for 2024 is not to forget the importance of properly analyze and read data for your website.
So by that, you're obviously focusing in on GA4. So has every website moved over to GA4 now?
I mean, they don't have another option if they were using Google Analytics tools because since 2023, Universal Analytics has stopped recollecting data. So everybody that wants to use Google Analytics needs to move to GA4. However, here I think the importance is not only to migrate to GA4, but to properly set this up.
Okay, so we'll talk about how to properly set that up just in a moment. But what are the big changes from Universal Analytics to GA4?
I think the big changes is that how Google Analytics shows and organizes the data. I mean, it has changed a little bit, and it's important that people know where everything is. What everything is, and not only that, I think that it also changed the way that Google wanted us to analyze information. They tried to help us more. They prepare a lot of guidances on, for example, how to organize events. But these are only guidances, and I think that people need to understand what's really important for them and how to set it up in a proper way.
So is GA4 better?
I mean, I think it's not worse.
That's a good compliment.
I think it's more or less the same. I really don't hate it, but it's true that it took me a time to properly understand how to analyze all my data for different types of clients.
So you've mentioned the importance of getting it set up correctly a couple of times. So what are the key things that an SEO needs to do or an analytics professional needs to do to ensure that it's set up correctly? And maybe what are one or two of the things that are generally missed?
Okay, so to set it up properly, I think there are different ways different things that we need to take into account. First of all, we need to define what we really need to analyze for our business, because it's very different if we are a B2B company, an e-commerce company, or a SaaS company, for example. So define our KPIs and then go to the events and set up the ones that we really need. So either if it's via, the main tool from GA4, or maybe we need Google Tag Manager to do so. Also, with this done, we need to set it up in a proper way as conversions. And with all of this, it will be easier for us to analyze all of our data. Also, if we set this up in a proper way, then we will be able to create, our audiences in a proper way. We'll be able to create our reports, for example, the explorations with the data that we really want to analyze. So I think it's important to know what we want, to know where it is in the new GA4, and then to set it up only the things that we need.
Got you. So just installing the script isn't enough?
No, it's not enough. It's not enough to just install the script, because there are, the events, conversions, audiences, a lot of things that you need to set up. And not only this, there are also other things that you need to publish. It's like, for example, Google gives you some reports, but there are some that they give it to you, but they are not published. For example, if you want to see all your Google search data, it's not published on the reports. You need to go to the library and publish it. So that's why I was trying to say that, what do you want? Do you want that your Google search data is shown on the tool? Then you need to search where this is and publish it. Because if before on the Universal Analytics, it was already published. In this case, you need to find and then make it visible for you.
And when it's set up correctly, what does this mean in terms of data? How is the data different compared with Universal Analytics?
It's different and not different in the same time. For example, it's different because the way basically that is shown before, for example, everything related to, let's change a little bit to traffic acquisition, it was only everything on one report. Now, for example, traffic acquisition, it's like two different reports. User acquisition report, this report helps you to understand how you capture a user for the first time, whereas the traffic acquisition reports is more on a session level. So, for example, you need to understand that it's a little bit different from before, that it's not the same, this kind of acquisition reports. So you need to understand this, and this is a little bit different. For example, something that is also different, everything related to, to events, to the interactions that are happening on your website. Before, this was only in the behavior report on Universal Analytics. Now it's like the most important thing on the engagement report. So you need to understand these differences and manage the best way for your business to analyze them.
What are an example of a few events that tend to be key for businesses that aren't really being tracked in GA4 and perhaps being missed a little bit?
For example, in a most automatical way, there are not a lot of interesting events, in my opinion, that are being tracked. There are some that are almost automatically, like for submissions or video reproductions that usually tend to be important. And sometimes this one you can set up in a more automatical way. However, sometimes it doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, so you need to do it with Tag Manager. But there are other really important events, such as add to cart, when a user wants to add a product to a cart. Usually for e-commerce, this is very important, and you need to set it up via Google Tag Manager. So in these cases, there are some important events that you really need to take to analyze them, and they are not there.
So what's the difference between an event and a conversion in GA4?
Basically, an event that, as Google says on the documentation, an event is like something that is happening on your website. And the conversion is something that is happening on your website that you want to highlight. So basically, you can have a lot of different events because maybe you think that can be interesting for you, but then the conversions will be the events that you already think, okay, these are my KPIs, let's mark them so they will be in a different report.
Understood. Okay. How do you use GA4, all the data in GA4, to help to lead your SEO strategy?
Okay, there are a lot of different things that we can do with GA4. First of all, the first thing that I will recommend is to create a Looker Studio report, for example, and to link there all the information that is important for your SEO strategy. For example, the way that you acquire users on website, also the way that, the conversions are happening on your website, also link this with your parameters so you have more information and you can analyze it more. And then there are so many things that can be useful for an SEO. Besides all of this, you can analyze the performances of your pages. You can analyze, how users interact with your content. So this is very helpful for you to understand what's happening on your website and maybe to refocus your strategies.
Understood. So then you could use that information to do things like perhaps merge pieces of existing content, see what style of content currently works, and perhaps produce more of that in the future.
Exactly. Totally this. And especially if you link everything with parameters and you need to do this via GA4, you will have the opportunity to have even more information.
Great. Okay. And do you also like to tie the data together from GA4 with Search Console in Looker to actually trying to establish what pages are actually ranking at a reasonable level?
Yeah. You can totally do that, do this, and you can integrate even more information than it was before in Universal Analytics. So then you will be able to analyze all your information more together and come to conclusions easier.
Okay, so it sounds like a very powerful tool. It almost sounds like too much for your average SEO to do that's doing lots of things, including content, and perhaps just working by themselves in a big organization. If someone's in that situation, should they probably ideally try to get a GA4 consultant to assist them on a part-time basis, or do you think it's realistic for most SEOs to be able to understand GA4?
I think my recommendation will be that on the beginning, to ask to a consultant, a GA4 consultant, as they will help them to set up or to organize what they really need. Maybe you can also create your own report from GA4. If you go through the library, you can create your personal report, not only use the reports that GA4 are offering, but create your own. So maybe depending on your kind of business, you can create your own report and not use, the default tool. So maybe using a consultant will help you to come to this conclusion easier and then to have all that you really need. But then with all being set up and knowing everything, what is it, I think an SEO can use it by their own.
Okay. And it also sounds like GA4 will impact other digital and other traffic driving activities. So is it necessary to conduct GA4 training throughout the business?
Totally. For example, there is a report only focused for paid channels. So I think that it will be totally necessary, especially because now, before Google on Universal Analytics, especially 1-2 years ago, I used to divide, the acquisition channels by 5 different typologies. Now there are like so many more. I mean, we have so many more in an easy way, so many more options to analyze our channels of acquisition. So if all these different departments knows about this, it will be easier for them to analyze the results.
Understood. Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention in terms of the way that GA4 displays data and a better way of displaying data for other people in the business? Because quite often business leaders want a snapshot of how the business is performing. So has what GA4 offers changed the way that these snapshots can be provided?
I think the important thing here is, for example, if you want to show results, not to use the tool, because I think that it's not very intuitive. You need to do it via the explorations report of the tool. You can create your own report via explorations or link it to Looker Studio. I think it's the best way to show in the best way for, other departments or, in case you need to show how it is working, your data and your results and how the strategies are working, because you can play a lot with filters on Looker Studio. So use it this way.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time understanding GA4 in 2024?
Recommendation: stop maybe you trying to do so many things maybe with ChatGPT, because I think this tool is very powerful and you can do a lot of things, but if you cannot analyze how this is performing, sometimes it has no sense. I think that it's very cool to try all the new tools that are here, but then it's important to know how this performance on your website. So maybe try to gather all your data in a proper way and then do all the cool things that you want to do that maybe will change your business.
And ChatGPT and other AI services have the potential of making it more challenging for analytics, of course, of tracking what's been successful and what's not, certainly if people are given direct answers within ChatGPT. Do you have any thoughts on how to actually track being found in generative search and ChatGPT and other services like that?
Not really at the moment, but I think that it will be possible.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Gemma Fontané is the co-founder at Orbit Digital, and you can find her over at orbitdigital.com. Gemma, thanks so much for being part of the SEO in 2024.
Thanks for inviting me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2024, the book, over at seoin2024.com.